Welcome to Relate Higher, a podcast dedicated to providing the leading standard in conscious higher relating and to teaching you a conscious framework for all of your relationships. This is your go-to resource for developing meaningful, conscious relationships across your life. I'm your host, award-winning relationship coach and consultant and former family lawyer, Letitia Ringe. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're talking about your relationship history. Your relationship history is what you bring into every relationship and every moment of relating with another person. This is your relationship history, which means you're the common factor. It is so important when it comes to creating a conscious relationship with another person, which is how we create thriving, successful, deeply fulfilling, and satisfying relationships, that we are aware of what our relationship history is that we bring to our relationships and our interactions with other people. This is also really important because it is part of our second series on the podcast, which is all about creating a conscious relationship with yourself. We need to be in conscious relationship with ourselves, which includes being aware of what our relationship history is so that we have the capacity to be in conscious relationships with other people. We must know what our relationship history is so that we can detect it when we are operating from our relationship history rather than from what is actually happening in the moment with that person in front of us right now. As best as possible, we want to learn how to move from unconscious relationship history and dynamics into being conscious and present in this moment with the other person, recognizing where we're responding from a perception of the past rather than to this person in front of us right now. This is what allows you the freedom to create new relationship experiences that are actually aligned with the love, connection, and intimacy that you want to experience in your romantic partnerships, in your friendships, your relationships with your family members, as well as your relationships in a professional context. Every single person in your community, you have the ability to meet that person and your relationship free from your relationship history, as long as you are aware of your relationship history and can detect when you're reacting from your history and your perception of that history rather than to the person in front of you and the relationship as it is right now. This will allow you to feel more free, and it also allows the person you're relating with to feel free as well, because they will be seen as they are in this moment rather than being seen as a projection of your past relationship history and your perception of those experiences. All right, so what is your relationship history? Your relationship history is comprised of 5 things. The first is your experiences of relationships to date, especially your experiences of relationships as a child. So you have interacted with people since you were born into this world. These include your parents and caretakers, your siblings if you have any, as well as any other people you were around a lot as a child. This also includes as you move into school and as you grow up as a child, as you become a teenager, all the people that you have been relating with. It also includes all of the relationships you've had since being a teenager, as a young adult, and then of course as the adult you are today and have experienced since you were a child. All these relationships are having an impact on you and your perception of relationships. And what happens is, as we move into relationships with new people and as we relate with people now that we've also had relationships with from the past, we bring our relationship experiences and the perception we had and have of those experiences, and then we project them onto the experiences we're having with those people today. So we don't really see the person in front of us. We don't really see the dynamic between us. We don't really see our relationship as it is now. We don't even really see ourselves as we are now. Instead, we're seeing a perception of all the experiences we've had from the past. in our relationships and also in our life. We project that onto ourselves. We project that onto the people we're relating with. This is not what we want to do, because those perceptions of your relationship experiences and the past, they tend to be perceptions that are not in alignment with what is actually happening in front of you today. And what we tend to do is simply attract experiences and create experiences that match up with our version of reality that we remember from the past. We don't consciously decide what we want to create and then align our actions and what we're creating with what we want to create. Instead, we take what we remember about the past consciously and unconsciously as truth, and we put that projection over all of our experiences, and we expect to recreate what we have experienced in the past, which is usually not what we actually want to experience. So, your relationship history is brought into your current relationships now. It means that the people you're relating with are not free to be seen as themselves right now. And for sure, the people that you related with in the past are not free to be seen as themselves right now unless you do something different, which is to be aware, hey, this is my perception of you or of relationships from the past that I am projecting onto you. I understand that I'm not actually seeing you and us as we are now. So I'm going to consciously choose to check myself and notice that I am projecting, because I'm aware of what I project onto other people. I've done the work to figure that out. And I'm going to do the work to actually be present and meet you fully as you are now without seeing you through a projection. I'm then going to interact with you, and I'm going to notice if I fall back into those past experiences and my perceptions of them and project them onto you. And so this work, as you see, is constant. This is why most people never do it, because one, it's almost like warrioress work where you need to be committed to what you want to create, which for most of us boils down to some version of love and connection. Yes, we also want our relationships to support us in healthy ways that allow us to thrive. But at the end of the day, what we're really looking for is love and connection. So if our experiences with others are not aligned with love and connection, a really big part of that is because we are not creating love and connection. In fact, we're projecting our stories and our experiences of relationships from the past, which tell us that we can't have what we want. And then we're committed to creating these, even though it's not what we want. It sounds wild. Why would we do this? But this is what we all do, not only in relationships, but in all other areas of our life, unless we move into approaching our relationships and our life from a place of consciousness. And that's what you're learning how to do on this podcast. The second part of your relationship history includes your protective patterns, attachment styles, and triggers. It's really important for you to understand what your protective patterns are, what your attachment styles are, and also what your triggers are, so that as you are moving from a protective pattern or from a trigger or from your attachment style, you can do the work to come to a place of meeting truth and the other person and yourself as you actually are, beyond these masking behaviors today. Now, I've done an entire episode on what a protective pattern is. I'll link it in the show notes to this episode so you can do a deep dive. As a short summary of a protective pattern is any behavior that you do, and usually we do them unconsciously, and we've been doing them a very long time, usually since we were a small child. It is a pattern, a behavior, a habit that we do to protect ourselves that leads us to actually closing off from love and connection or any other need and desire you have in a relationship. For every single person who has a need or desire within a relationship that is not being met, it is because you likely have a protective pattern that stops you from meeting that need and desire. And it's really challenging because the protective pattern was established in the first place to get you what you needed in that moment. It's just that it's not what you need from a deeper level. It's protecting you. It's coming from a place of fear, and you got that need you needed met at that time and continue to need met in that particular way, in the best way you could. But it's actually not truly serving or supporting you because it's cutting you off from either deeper needs and desires, or it's cutting you off from needs and desires you have right now. So part of our work together, and part of the work I spend a lot of time doing with every single person I work with in my Conscious Relationship Coaching program, is on bringing awareness to what those protective patterns are for them and how they're showing up in their relations or within the relationship area within their life, and stopping them from getting what they want. This could look like stopping them from meeting a romantic partner or a friend or having professional relationships that they truly desire. It can look like what is stopping you from creating the love and connection within your current romantic relationship, or within a relationship with a family member, or with a team member, or with a friend. Protective patterns are always the reason why we're not getting what we want. And the hard part is learning how to not only identify what the protective pattern is. In fact, that's actually the easier part. The hard part is transmuting those patterns so that you learn to implement new patterns in your life that actually get you what you really need and want, as well as those deeper needs and wants in your relationship. So think about any desire you have in a relationship right now, or if it's difficult to think about the desires but easier to think about the frustrations and the challenges, think of a challenge, then look at what the actual opposite of that challenge is, which is usually what you're actually desiring, and then ask yourself, what is one behavior that I am exhibiting right now that stops me from having this desire met? I'll give you some examples. Some very common protective patterns include people pleasing, putting your invisibility cloak on so no one gets to know the real you, when one of your deepest desires is to be seen and known within a relationship, or to be loved, but you can't ever feel truly loved when you don't allow people to really see you and get to know you. It can look like micromanaging, controlling, or even caretaking, when what you really want is for someone to look after you, or someone to take the lead, someone to feel like they are investing as much into the relationship as you are. It can look like being defensive, when what you really want is to feel like people understand, get you, and support you, but you immediately go into being defensive, which means that you constantly recreate this experience that no one understands me, they don't support me, people are against me. When what you really want to create is an experience where you feel supported, where you feel like people get you, they understand you, and they're hearing you. But that protective pattern of defensiveness stops you from having those needs and desires met. Now, a protective pattern can also be a behavior that is actually a good behavior in one area of your life. It's very supportive, it helps you get what you want, but it's not helping you get what you want in this area of your life. So protective patterns can also be patterns that are helpful in other areas, or they seem helpful on the surface, but in relation to our relationship, or even the specific relationship you're looking at, they are directly stopping you from getting what you want, and in essence, they are closing you off from love. A protective pattern is also coming from a place of fear. It was there to protect you. Whenever you're protecting yourself, it's generally coming from a place of fear. So it's really fun to be aware of what your protective patterns are, because once you're aware of them, you'll start seeing yourself doing it all of the time. This is the first part of the transformation process. But remember, transformation is not just about awareness. That is step one. It's a step most people overlook. It's a very important step, but it's also just the first step. In order to transform and free yourself from constantly operating and recreating these protective patterns which block your core desires in relationships, you need to learn how to create new and healthy, supportive, connective patterns that are actually going to get you what you want. Now, your attachment style, you might have read a bit about attachment style. It's a very hot topic at the moment. Some of the general attachment styles that people talk about are anxious attachment, avoidant attachment. You might just hear the term insecure attachment or even disorganized attachment. Some people are also anxious avoidant. Now, different relationships, different people, different moments of our life, different moments of the relationship journey can trigger different attachment styles. Attachment styles simply show you another way of understanding protective patterns that you might have. And what is helpful about this information is that as you resonate with some of the notorious patterns that each of these attachment styles have, you can then realize, hey, when I'm exhibiting this behavior, it's very likely that it's not because of the person in front of me and our relationship. It is actually a protective pattern that I learned in the past that I am now using in this relationship now to protect myself. So what I really need here is probably some version of safety so that I can actually open up to the love and connection that I actually want to create and experience here. And finally, a trigger is any pattern of behavior that you have when you're triggered by another person. So just think whenever you've been in a conflict with another person you're relating with, how you tend to respond to conflict. Do you shut down? Do you yell? Do you walk away? Do you fight? We all have patterns around the way we respond to conflicts and when we feel triggered. You want to bring awareness as to what those behaviors are so that the next time you're engaging in those behaviors, that is an indication that you are in an unconscious pattern that is a pattern from the past and it's not actually about the person in front of you. This allows you to see that because you're in the pattern, you're most likely projecting onto the person in front of you something from the past. And so you have the opportunity now with that awareness to shift from the pattern back into what you actually want to be creating here and behaviors that will actually create that. Number 3, your relationship history also includes your unmet childhood needs. This is really important because when we speak about protective patterns, attachment styles, and also triggers, these are usually linked to needs that were not met when we were a child when these behaviors first began. So the protective pattern, even the attachment style or the trigger behavior is actually trying to get a need met in that moment. And it is a need that we needed when we were a child. We started in the protective patterns, the attachment style, and also the trigger behavior to get that need met using our child brain in the best way we could at that time. But it wasn't actually a supportive way, and we didn't have the awareness or the understanding of that as a child, so we simply chose a behavior that would get the need we had met in that moment. Often that need is safety. Then we operate in our relationships with these protective patterns, attachment styles, and trigger behaviors, trying to get that need met. But like I mentioned before, that particular pattern is actually blocking you from creating the actual needs and desires you have on a deeper level. The need and the desire for love and connection, for instance, as well as any other need or desire you could name. So we want to really understand what your childhood needs are. And I've also done a whole episode on this topic in the past on the podcast, which I'll link in these show notes so that you can understand it more deeply. So we want to learn healthy ways that we can get these needs met now so that the protective patterns aren't necessary, and also so we can actually create the needs and desires we have relationally today in ways that actually support that and come from a place of love rather than fear. Number 4, your relationship history also includes your relationship mindset. So this includes all of your stories and beliefs, including your thoughts about yourself and the way you relate or the way that you show up in relationships or what you have to bring to relationships, as well as your stories, beliefs, and thoughts about other people and about relationships generally. Consciously and unconsciously, we have a huge amount of beliefs, stories, and thoughts that we are coming into all of our relationships with, and then looking at our relationships and the people in front of us as well as ourselves through this lens of all of these belief stories and thoughts, many of which come from fear and many of which are in complete opposition to what we want to create, which sets us up, unless we bring awareness to the mindset we bring and how we're projecting that onto our current relationships, people, and ourselves, we will continue to recreate more of what we don't want of unless we shine this light and then we make intentional, conscious decisions to project and look at people that we're relating with as well as ourselves through a lens that we actually want to keep creating. Even better, you want to go further and learn to see yourself and the person in front of you and your relationships as they actually are now, from a place of unconditional love, so that you can actually truly see what is happening within the relationship, within yourself, within them, so that you can make the best decisions for your relationship as you move forward. And finally, number 5, your body and your nervous system is also part of your relationship history. So you bring your body and your nervous system to your relationships, including your relationship with yourself, and your body and your nervous system will sometimes be in a stress or fear-based response that is being triggered by something that is happening right now that reminds your body and your nervous system of the past or where it believes it needs protection. This means that you're not actually responding to something that is happening right now. Instead, you're responding to your nervous system and body pattern from the past. So the more that you can understand how to support your body and your nervous system to be here in the now, to be regulated, to feel safe, the better you're able to actually meet yourself and the other person from a place that is free from the past, rather than simply recreating this usually stressful, triggered response within the body that leads you to shutting down and closing yourself off from the love and connection you desire. All right, so now we understand what our relationship history is and how it impacts our relationships. What do you do? Well, now I want you to know 3 things. The first is, what we've already explained is that your relationship history